Hey, everybody. Oh, my. I got a gentleman on here who wrote a book, and the book is good. It's gooder than good. It's very good. And it's about, I'm going to let him tell it what it's about, but oh my God, I'm so happy that he decided to come on the channel. Because what he's talking about is really kind of what's hot right now because of this movie. And you'll know what I'm talking about. Judas and the Messiah. And it's so amazing that I found him and he agreed to be on the show. So come on, folks, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that notifications bell. Because you know it, I put 3, 4 videos up a week. I'm coming at you strong. And I like to say I come at you straight, no chaser. Oh my God. So do all that. And as you might know, I got a movie out. It's called Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. Talking about slaves who learned how to read and write and went to college. And black millionaires in the 1800s. What racists did to destroy black business districts. And that really kind of leads into what we're going to talk about today. The movie is on Amazon. It's streaming on Amazon. You can get the DVD. I got the book that complement the movie. The book got over 200 facts on Black history, similar to the movie, but it's just a little bit more in depth. Both of them, get them both. Get one of them, get something. Get my man's book, the guy who's we about to interview. But reading is very important. And so, it's kind of amazing that when we talk about history, I try to go the whole gambit of a little bit of everything. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to let him introduce himself, say a little bit about it. I got a few questions and let's roll, everybody. Thank you for watching Strong Inspirations. Introduce yourself, my friend.
All right. My name is Jeffrey Haas. Thank you for having me today. I am the author of a book, The Assassination of Fred Hampton, How the FBI and Chicago Police Murdered a Black Panther, which is also the subject matter of a film that's just come out last weekend called Judas and the Black Messiah. Anyway, my connection to Fred Hampton and to the history was as a young lawyer in Chicago. We had just started, actually at Fred Hampton's urging, a people's law office there. We had worked at Legal Aid, and Fred Hampton said, the Panthers are getting harassed. Every time we sell a newspaper, go to a demonstration, I drive my car, the police are pulling me over. We need lawyers to represent people's movements. So 5 other people and myself started a people's law office in a formerly a sausage shop in Chicago. Still had the sausage awning over our office for a couple of years. And we started representing the Panthers, the Young Lords, the Patriots, SDS, the anti-war movement. And actually PLO continues to today, 51 years later.
Let me ask you a question. Let's go back a minute. What time frame are you talking about? When is this?
Okay, this is the 60s. And I graduated law school in 67 in Chicago. And Chicago was a real hotspot then. Dr. King had come to Chicago and marched and said he'd never seen racism and violence the way he did in Chicago, and so many swastikas. 68 was the Democratic Convention in Chicago, and people will remember that, of course, for the whole world is watching about the Vietnam War.
Okay.
The conspiracy trial started in the fall of 69. And then you had the Panthers started their chapter in November of 68. The Young Lords started as a Puerto Rican gang and then took on gentrification. The Young Patriots were a group of Appalachian whites in Uptown. The anti-war movement was at a real high, and so was many of the counterculture movements. So there was a hotbed. I think we felt like we were the center of a lot of things that were happening.
And then, now, when we go back a little bit further, the Black Panthers if you know this story, and I'm asking you some more of a question, they started in Oakland, California.
They did. They started, Huey Newton and Bobby Steele started in Oakland, California in '66. One of the issues they started around was police brutality, and they actually started following police around when they pulled Black people over to make sure or to keep a record of what they did and as a way to inhibit police violence. And so the Panthers started in Oakland and quickly spread across the country.
Okay.
It was a very popular movement.
How big was the chapter in Chicago?
Well,
How many people would you say? You know, that kind of thing.
Well, I guess it depends on if you count cadre, people who worked pretty much full time, maybe 100 or 200. If you count
really?
all the
Okay.
reporters in terms of the breakfast program and the health clinic and sold newspapers, it would be a lot more than that. So,
Okay.
and then they reached a large swath of the public.
Now, beside the police brutality, you mentioned about the breakfast program. The real side is they weren't doing nothing but just trying to help themselves. That's the basis of it?
Help? What do you mean help?
What I mean by that, they were just trying for self-preservation, trying to protect one another, trying to uplift the community. That was the whole basis of it there.
Well, yeah, they call them survival programs, and they included land, bread, peace, ending mass incarcerations, community control of police. So they were socialist programs, but designed to politicize people to begin to demand those things. Why shouldn't our society have those things? And so they provided the breakfast program so kids wouldn't go to school hungry. Eventually, they provided health clinics, and they provided education in the form of the newspaper.
Yeah. So now the sad part of it is, at the end of the day, it's really just Black people trying to make it for themselves and fill the gaps where the government wasn't helping.
Well, I think they wanted to do that, and they wanted to mobilize the community to do that. You know, they realized they couldn't overcome and solve all the inequities, but if they could mobilize the community to make these demands, if they could join with poor Hispanics and poor whites who had some of the same problems of bad schools, of police brutality,
Sure.
you know, and housing. So yeah, they wanted fundamental change, but they wanted it brought about by the community with the Panthers.
Now, is Fred Hampton the guy who brought it to Chicago and is the founder of the Chicago chapter?
The Chicago chapter was started by a couple of SNCC people, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and they had been active in it. They went out to the West Coast, Bob Brown and Bobby Rush, and they out on the West Coast said, you got to start a chapter. So about the same time, they had an event out in Maywood, and Fred Hampton introduced Stokely Carmichael, who was speaking. And people were so impressed with Fred, who was this, at that time, 20-year-old young man, such a good speaker, that when they started the Panthers in Chicago, Fred was made the deputy chairman.
Was he college educated, or he just was a guy that could talk and had a little gumption about himself?
He grew up in Maywood. He was well read. He also had learned the practice, not only going to church with his parents and learning the cadence of the ministers, but also had memorized the rhythm and the cadence of Dr. King and Malcolm X and memorized their speeches. He did read a lot. He did connect a lot with the struggles that were going on around the world, the liberation struggles. And in high school, he was a good student. But I think a couple of things that really stood out with him, he couldn't accept injustice. So even in this high school, he led a march because Black girls weren't being considered for homecoming queens. And then a march to get more Black teachers and administrators. And then a whole march to City Hall to demand a swimming pool because there were no place where Blacks could swim. There was a private pool in a nearby suburb where whites could go. So Fred just stood up for people a lot. And he got on the radar of the police for leading demonstrations and got arrested first for that. and then for supposedly passing out $71 worth of ice cream to kids and holding a vendor down. So he was, even though I think he lived across the street, and they had the vendor identify him.
Wow. So now in all actuality, he's a good guy. He's not no revolution. He's a revolutionary. He's an activist, but he's a good guy trying to help his people.
Absolutely. And he stood up for all these things. He then became the head of the NAACP suburban chapter. And he spoke so well and organized so well, their membership grew tenfold. So he knew how to reach people. I even learned from his mother when he was 10 years old. It was a working class suburb, and he would go invite all the neighborhood kids over on Saturday morning and make breakfast for them. So I said he started his own breakfast program at age 10 for kids who didn't really have enough food. So there was something very warm and magnanimous about Fred Hampton that people were drawn to.
Right. What did he do for a living?
Well, actually, in the summer, he barely got out of high school, but in the summertime, he got a job at Corn Products, which was a manufacturing company that made corn syrup and other things out of corn in Chicago. His mother, who had come up, and father, who had come up from Haynesville, Louisiana, had factory jobs, and his mother was actually a union steward there. So Fred I think he also worked at a GM factory one summer. Yeah. Then he enrolled in junior college. But when he wasn't organizing or in school, he was trying to help support his mom and dad.
Yeah. Now, when we talk about organizations starting out, let's say it started out, and you might know the date, July 1st or something like that. How long does it take for it to start to take on, where people are now starting to come to the meetings, and they're starting to implement their plans? And then between that time and before the police started getting involved and starting to crush it all as best they did, how long did they have a really good quiet run?
Well, Fred Hampton was on the mark, sort of on the police radar even before he joined the Panthers. When he got convicted of that ice cream heist, the judge said, all right, I'm going to give him probation. There was limited property damage. Nobody was hurt. And Ed Hanrahan was the very political state's attorney then, and was the heir apparent to Daley. And he had declared that Black members of gangs were animals and that the Panthers were a gang. So he already was being targeted more by local police. When they opened the Panther chapter in November of 68, in Chicago, about 2 years after the Panthers in Oakland. They immediately drew young college students, junior college students, some young gang members, a lot of young people. As somebody said, the Panthers weren't asking for their rights, they were demanding their rights, and that had an appeal to young people. And then Fred had the ability to speak to welfare mothers, to college students, to law students and law professors, and because he had such passion, and because he was so legitimate, that he didn't just say, do this and do that. He said, if you're going to, be at the breakfast program at 6:30, he was at the breakfast program at 6:30, making breakfast, playing with the kids, talking to the parents. And he didn't ask people to do what he wasn't willing to do. So it turns out that the FBI actually recruited an informant named William O'Neill to go and he joined the Panthers within a month of their opening in 1968. So they were already on the radar. And it wasn't very long afterwards that in the following year, there were 2 Chicago police raids on the Panther office and 1 FBI raid on the Panther office.
Wow. So they grew to have offices, and did they meet and strategize like once a week or something like that? How organized were they in that regard?
Well, I think they had 2 or 3 methods. First of all, I think they held political education classes 2 times a week that they wanted members to come to. Then you had outreach programs where people sold newspapers all over the city and reported on that. Then they had, not too long afterwards, the Breakfast for Children program, which meant getting donations for food and cereal, and of course going and getting locations. They started with the Better Boys Club, and they ended up with several breakfast programs that were operating at hundreds of kids were being fed every day. Eventually had a health clinic. They also had a program where they bused people to prisons. So it grew rapidly, but because of this ice cream truck robbery in March of '69, Fred Hampton, because Hanrahan told the judge that he was a gang member and he should get in prison for this ice cream heist, he got a sentence of 2 to 5 years in Menard Prison, and he was sent to Southern Illinois. It was there that we actually, the People's Law Office, we went and got him out on an appeal bond. And so we were sort of the Panther lawyers from that point on, with the
Wow.
many other lawyers in Chicago.
Did that put your life, your organization on alert too? Did you have to worry about? I always wonder that about lawyers. Do you sitting there and you saying my client didn't do this, I want to say that. Does that put you on Front Street some?
Well, we were a little nervous, initially more about the local police, because and the Panthers were talking about police brutality, and we were suing the police for police brutality. And so when we opened our office, we had a cabinet behind the wall with a 9mm and a shotgun there to sort of protect ourselves. I think there was a certain amount of white skin privilege and professional privilege being lawyers, that, we had a protection and somewhat of an immunity. And then I don't know that we were fearless. We just were really motivated by the movements that we represented, and I guess accepted some of the risks that went with it. I don't think it was anywhere equal, certainly to Black political people or to other movement people.
So as a person yourself, you had to be the kind of guy that said, I want to do this. This had to be a decision you made, right?
Exactly. And in my book, I talk about going to the speech that Fred Hampton gave when he came out of prison. And there was a tremendous number of people, an audience at the People's Church, and my law partner, Flint Taylor, and I went, and I heard some of Fred's inspiring words, even about going down to Menard and hearing the beat of the people. And we got to listen to the people. And then he gave this very rousing speech about peace to you if you're willing to fight for it. And if you don't deserve peace. And then he said, and I was sitting there, and he said, everybody stand up. And I did. And then he said, and raise your right hand. And I did. And he said, I am. And I did that. And he said, a revolutionary. And I couldn't quite say that. I thought to myself, well, I'm a lawyer for the movement, but not of the movement. But by the time he finished, he had everybody, including me, saying that and feeling inspired by his own commitment and genuineness. So he, my decision was assisted by people who were very politically committed, and Fred Hampton in particular.
So things are going pretty well in the programs and stuff like that. You get him out of jail for the ice cream heist. When does it all really kind of go kaput, for the lack of a better word?
Well, like
for
I
the first time.
The harassment, there were 2 police raids on the office and a FBI raid. And the FBI raid they used the pretext of a fugitive being there. The fugitive himself was an informant, so the FBI sent him into the office. Then they went out and got warrants to search the office for harboring a fugitive. And then the fugitive would leave, and then the FBI attacked the office, got the donor list. And the police actually had a shootout with the Panthers, and at one point actually burned the office afterwards. So they were under harassment a lot, and they were picked up a lot. So almost from the day they opened, there wasn't a smooth, easy period exactly. So I think, and they also had a very strong anti-police, sometimes rhetoric about off the pig, which to them meant get violent police out of our community. I'm not sure the police took it that way, but there was a lot of white reaction to just the idea of Black people gaining control over their lives and demanding basic things that every society should provide.
Did you see white people kind of join in, sympathizers, what have you, to kind of help along? And did somebody besides yourself, the law team, try to help kind of ease the pressure on them?
Yes, I mean, the Black Panthers were themselves, the members were Black, but they were very close, and we worked very closely with white allies. We were a law office. There were doctors who and nurses who went to their clinics, who volunteered, some of whom were white. There were artists, there were musicians, all of whom sometimes raised money. There were people and even local grocery stores who contributed food to the breakfast program. So, and then of course they had their famous Rainbow Coalition, working with the Young Lords, his Puerto Rican organization, the Young Patriots, and the anti-war movement. So they were in alliance with a lot of people, and there was a lot of white material support and working together among progressive white people.
Yes. So now we what I try to do is I try to get the good out of all this before we end on how bad it ended. How bad did it end? What's the end result? Did he get, they had the shootout, then what happened?
What we learned was Hanrahan, and there were 14 Chicago police assigned to Hanrahan's Special Prosecution Unit. And this is what, we didn't know this exactly at the time, but what we learned, because we had a 13-year litigation, they came in, knocked on the door, and they came in shooting. And they killed Mark Clark at the front door. They used a machine gun and shot 3 people in the middle bedroom. And they actually went in, and on the morning of December 4th, I went to the police station where Fred's fiance, 8.5 months pregnant with their son, was being held after the raid. And she told me firsthand that the police came in shooting, there was a lull in the fire, and she was pulled out of the bedroom. And then the police went in, and she heard one of them say, "I don't know if he's going to make it. Is he still alive?" And she heard 2 shots, and the other one said, "He's good and dead now." And they dragged his body out. So this, of course, is not what the police said. The police said the Panthers opened fire, that they didn't know it was a Panther apartment, and they were ambushed. But when we actually charted the bullets and the bullet holes and the directions, 90 shots came from the police. The only shot going out was from Mark Clark's shotgun. After he was fatally wounded, his shot went into the ceiling of the hallway. But the public was told lies for a long time. It was only after we had the stories of the survivors and the physical evidence that the public and the press began to turn. And it had the Black community, which was divided over the Panthers, was not divided over the fact that a young Black leader could be executed in his bed at 4:30 in the morning. So
now, who was that? Hold on, who are you talking about? Who was that?
When Fred Hampton was executed. In other words,
okay, so yeah, okay.
There was a big community response, like, this is not right. And members of the Black aldermen and representatives who had always been totally loyal to the Daily Machine rebelled and formed a coalition with progressive whites to demand a justice for the survivors, to demand investigations. And I think this coalition that came together was the coalition that eventually elected Harold Washington as Chicago's first Black mayor. But we didn't know for a long time. We thought this was just the local police under a very ambitious prosecutor. After we filed a lawsuit, it turned out that one of the persons in the party was an FBI informant, and that there was this secret FBI program called COINTELPRO, which was disclosed after the raid of an FBI office outside Philadelphia. And when we learned more about COINTELPRO, we learned that it was a program that had targeted the entire movement, but particularly the Black movement, which it called Black nationalist hate groups, which we asked, what's a Black nationalist hate group? And they said, well, it's a Black organization with a headquarters in Washington. This program, though, targeted the Panthers in particular, and there was a mandate to destroy, disrupt, or neutralize the Panthers by any means necessary. And one of the other FBI directives from which the film takes its name was FBI ordered every FBI office that had a Panther chapter to prevent the rise of a Black messiah who could unify and electrify the masses. And they mentioned that Elijah Muhammad could have been such a person, or Stokely Carmichael, or Dr. King, even if he gave up his pretended following of nonviolence. These were people they mentioned. And we think Fred Hampton was targeted because he was somebody who had the ability to speak and organize masses of people.
Now, let me go back right quick. How was Fred Hampton killed?
The police, well, it turned out later that this FBI informant gave the Hanrahan's police a diagram of the apartment where Fred and Deborah would be staying.
Is that in Chicago?
And that's in Chicago.
All right.
We learned this in the course of this litigation. We got this floor plan, which was in a do not file, which meant there was only one copy of it and it could have been destroyed, but the U.S. attorney didn't want to get caught destroying evidence. He turned it over. This floor plan showed not only the apartment and the room layout, it showed the furniture layout. It even showed the bed where Hampton and Johnson would be sleeping. And sure enough, that morning, when the police came in firing, when there was a lull, as I said, somebody yelled, there's a pregnant broad here, a pregnant woman here, a pregnant sister here, is what they yelled. And the police pulled her out in her nightgown, pulled it up, and said, oh, we got a broad here. And then two people went in, and as I said, what she heard from the hallway and what she told me is, they said, is he going to make it? Is he dead yet? And then there were two shots, and another policeman said, he's good and dead now. And sure enough, the physical evidence showed two parallel bullets to his head, which were the fatal shots.
Wow. Okay, now he's shot. Does all this bring an end to the Black Panther chapter in Chicago? Does it keep going a little bit longer? What happens after that?
It does keep going longer. But I think the killing of a leader who was as dynamic as Fred had a big effect. Also, it was repression. It was met as an example. So I think people became very nervous. If you could be killed in your bed by the prosecutor who was supposedly following the law, everybody was vulnerable. So I think it did lead to, over time, to people leaving the party, to people not feeling safe. They also continued to follow and harass other Panther members, and went to their jobs and threatened them, and went to their bosses. In many cases, tried to break up marriages. So the repression continued even after the murder of Fred. So I think after a couple of years, or even almost beginning pretty closely after Fred's killing, the Panther chapter in Chicago began to decline.
I guess as I come to a close, one of my last questions is why did they do that to him? Why didn't they just let him be doing the good thing that they was doing? Why do you think that was?
Because J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI were very racist, and they were afraid of Black power, of any kind of Black equality. So in other words, they saw any Black people getting control of their lives, of their communities, of stopping repression as a threat to them, as a threat to white supremacy and law enforcement. So they just like they couldn't accept that Dr. King was organizing, and they tried to blackmail him and threatened him to tried to get him to kill himself. He saw all these Black efforts to improve Black lives as a threat, and that was the mindset of Hoover. Perhaps it was of Nixon and John Mitchell, also in the White House.
Sure. Wow. Now, do you have a copy of your book there that you can show us, something like
Yes.
that? We can see it. And
Let's
how
see.
do people get copies? Is it on Amazon?
It is everywhere. Your local bookstore, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I encourage people to get, there's whatever if your bookstore is open, go there. And if they'll order it for you.
Yes.
It's actually been a bestseller recently.
Oh, excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a lot more interest in Fred Hampton since Black Lives Matter arose, and who he was, and his inspiration, and people really want to hear about it.
Yes. Thank you so very much for coming on Strong Inspirations. You gave it to us straight, no chaser, my friend. Everybody go out and get a copy of his book. This is Black history. This is history. This happened. He's telling it to you. He was there. He was at the meetings. And at the end of the day, he rose his hand up and said, I'm a revolutionary.
Well,
that's what happens. Everybody, come on, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, tell people about Strong Inspirations. Watch my movie, read my book too, because, we're trying to give you some knowledge to enlighten you. Thank you so very much for coming on our channel. You stay strong, you stay safe, you stay on your grind. Thank you very much, everybody. We out. Bye-bye.
You can find me at jeffreyhaas.org too.
Yes, there you go. I'm going to put all that in the description.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for having me. Really
Thank
enjoyed
you. Bye-bye.